Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next edition of AmiSights. I'm AmiSights, your host, along with my co-host, Lynn Ozer, a.k.a. SBA Queen. So excited to have Dr. Shari Walling, ZenFounder, with us today, who's going to help us really find our inner purpose. Maybe calm down a little bit, talk about what's important. So, Dr. Walling, Shari, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you. Thank you both for having me.
We're happy to have you and interested in how you can help us calm down. We're all pretty stressed out for whatever reason we have to be stressed out. And I'm sure everyone has their own different reason for that. And so it'll be great to hear that. But tell us a little bit about you, Shari. Starting with, did you always want to be a doctor? How did you get into your practice?
Yeah.
You can go back as far as you want.
Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a pilot. So I don't know where that idea came from. I think I really, you like to serve the drinks, do you? Yeah, I think I just really wanted a ticket out of town from the little town I was growing up in. And so I would see the planes fly overhead and was like, how do I get on one of those going that way? But yeah, I became a psychologist. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I also sort of randomly have a bunch of training in theology, which shows up to be more useful than one would expect working in the business world. But I started my career working with people who had really high intensity jobs. And so that was mostly people who had trauma exposure in the context of their work, like first responders, police officers, ER doctors. I worked a lot with people returning from deployments in the military. So I've always loved these like high intensity people who are doing really hard things. And then I fell in love and married a tech entrepreneur who created software for a living. And so in my living room in the evenings were all of these tech people, and they were like as stressed out as the ER docs who were having people die. I was just like, what's up with you all that you are so tightly wound here? So I got really interested in entrepreneur mental health and sort of the mindset of people who decide to start and run their own businesses. What's kind of going on with them? What's their identity investment in their companies? And so that's really been my career since 2016, is really focused on entrepreneurial mindset. And so I work a lot one-on-one with leaders and CEOs, entrepreneurs, and then I do a lot of presentations and education. I write books, I have a podcast, that kind of thing to help people better understand the mental inner workings of entrepreneurs.
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've always worked with entrepreneurs on the business end, definitely not the psychological end, but always loved being with entrepreneurs because they're artists, they're business artists. That's how I always describe them. And they have such an interesting combination of right brain and left brain with the creativity and so forth. So I think it's fascinating what you do and how you get into their mindset. So what is it? What's the commonality that makes someone drive to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I love the term artist. And I often think about entrepreneurs as artists or creators or makers, right? They're bringing into being something that doesn't exist, whether it's a way of thinking about how to inventory plumbing parts, or it's a way to actually create a new brick and mortar space, or it's a way to write software, like whatever it is that they're doing, they're making something that didn't exist before. One of the things that I spend a lot of time, I think, thinking about and talking about, though, is the way that creativity maps onto what we might call neurodivergence. So if you think about the bell curve, if you remember your statistics from, freshman year of college,
sure,
we see the majority of people.
PTSD, but
well, I know a good clinician who can help treat that. Most people function in this, like, sort of in the middle of the curve. And then you've got these people out at the edges. And entrepreneurs are often out at the edges of neurological functioning. They're seeing something differently. They're functioning differently. Their brains are working a bit differently. So often people come into entrepreneurship because they aren't necessarily very successful in these traditional routes. Like, they can't climb the ladder at the corporate job. Like they can't do the cubicle thing. Like they just can't do it. Their brain and their body won't let them do it. Or, often I know a lot of entrepreneurs, very successful entrepreneurs who just didn't make it through high school or college. Like they are people who are not wired to follow the herd. And that's a wonderful trait. That's the creative trait. But it can also be a very painful trait when you're trying to explain yourself, or you're trying to seek validation from your family or your community. You're just trying to be understood. You're also trying to lead others. And you might be the person who, again, is not going to follow the herd, but you have to understand the herd well enough to direct the herd, which is a little bit of a trick for people. So I think really seeing entrepreneurs as creators, as you're identified, is a wonderful way to see it, because we see both the strengths and weaknesses in that way of being.
As an entrepreneur, you got a raging entrepreneur over here, okay?
Boy.
How does somebody find, as you go out on your journey, the appropriate balance around them, understanding you're absolutely right, but how do you build a team around you to help you push through all that?
Do you mean a team within your company, or do you mean a team within your support team, your people?
Team, either at home or friends or in your company.
Yeah. So it's a good question, because I think we really want to build a team that's multi-layered or multifactorial team. So ideally, you're building a team not in your company, you're building a team around what your business needs, not necessarily around you. Obviously, thinking about yourself as a piece of that puzzle. But outside of your business, all entrepreneurs really need friendship. And that sounds like a very simple thing to say, but I know a lot of folks who spend so much time working, and then when they're not working, they find themselves to be the most important and most interesting person in any room, and they're frankly just not very good at friendship. But they're missing out on this really important part of life. And so the process of making the priority to be in friendship, to be a romantic partner to, your person, not only because they are supporting your dreams and your business and what you want to do, but also because you are supporting theirs. So entrepreneurs can gently lean a bit narcissistic. It takes a deep belief in one's perspective to have the ego strength to make something that doesn't exist. And so there's great strength in that. And then the shadow side, or the weakness of that, is they may not always be wonderful in relationships, and so need some practice and training and tips, which is where someone like me comes in, a psychologist, a therapist, a coach, someone who can sort of see a person in their playing field and observe the moves they're making and provide some ideas, strategies, tips for them to be more effective at getting what they want without maybe repeating the patterns that have not been super effective for them.
So let's break that down. If you guys are open to, ladies are open to it, into three parts. The one is the entrepreneur inside their company. The other is the entrepreneur in a friendship circle, and the other is an entrepreneur at home, or with their kids or with their spouse. Let's start with the company. So you said that I want to challenge your thinking a little bit. Larry, you said when you build your team around your company, you have to build it around the needs of your company. And I understand that there might be that you need sales or marketing or this or that or technical expertise in what you do. But doesn't the entrepreneur also need to build a team around them in terms of culture and skill sets of the people, that yin and yang, their brain?
It depends a bit on what you're trying to do with your company. I mean, I have just written a book called Exit Strategy, which is about the psychology of exiting your business. And in that, we talk a lot about, it's a book co-authored with my husband, Rob, but we talk a lot about preparing a business that is quite autonomous from the founder. A lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with that because they made the thing and they want to be part of the company, right? They find a lot of satisfaction and joy and meaning from being deeply interwoven in the company. But if you want to build a healthy company, it should not be around a person. It should be systematized and able to grow and thrive and exist without the individual that founded it. That's going to be your most scalable and sellable company. the question is a little bit nuanced, right? At the beginning of your company, when you're in the early phases of starting a company, it's often you and maybe whatever handful of contractors or support staff you can hire. But as your company grows and becomes more mature, optimally, you don't want your personality to factor so heavily into the team that you're building, because in a perfect world, you are building yourself out of a job.
So I understand that, but let me push a little deeper. Most entrepreneurs, I think like the word ADHD is a little bit overused, even like narcissist is maybe a little bit overused, but we love ideas. Like I could start a new idea every week if I was in the mood.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
You think of them, that's for sure.
I have to have a team around me to tell me no, not no, but to help me find the right balance and equilibrium, like some checks and balances. So I just wonder if I agree with you about the autonomous part. I agree with you all that, but I also think that in life, our greatest strength is our greatest weakness, kind of thing. And so you need that raging entrepreneur in every company. And at the same time, you need process people and
absolutely. I mean, things like EOS and these systems of understanding how different roles fit together to play well are super valuable. But before most entrepreneurs can be really effective at doing that, they have to do enough self-reflection to have a clear sense of their strengths and weaknesses. So they can really eyes open, who do I need on my team to help offset the things that I'm amazing at and fill in the gaps of the things that I don't like to do, don't want to do, am not good at.
I don't know if you ever heard, there's this organizational psychology guy called Itzhak Adizes, Adizes.
I don't know him.
And he has this PAEI model, and it says there's 4 elements of a great team. There's the P, which is like the repetitive things. The A is the administrator. The E is the entrepreneur. And the I is the integrator, mm-hmm. who really worries about the people and how they all fit together. What he encourages everyone to do is it's really almost impossible for any one person to be good at all those 4 things.
Sure.
And so he encourages you to say, what's your strongest thing? What's your second thing? And then to build a team around you that supplements all that, complements all that. So like, I'm a raging E, and I think I'm a pretty good integrator, worrying about people and culture and stuff mm-hmm. like that. I'm a terrible A, dotting I's and crossing T's, forget about it. And I'm a terrible person that do the same thing more than once. So I have teams of people. I built my company knowing my weaknesses, people around me who aren't good at what I do. And so it's just a thought. And it's just, but I do think if an entrepreneur can understand their strength and then how that creates weaknesses and build support around them for that, it can help a lot.
Absolutely.
Make any sense?
Yeah.
Makes sense. But my question is the stresses that you see with entrepreneurs. Is there a theme for the stresses, or is it like every industry has its own different stress? I thought what you said was just so interesting about, the entrepreneur who's selling their business, who intends to eventually sell their business and it's all wrapped around them. That's mm-hmm. not going to monetize very well. That's kind of interesting. So do entrepreneurs really stress out about that? I know that people, or there's theories out there that say, you start a business to sell it, build an asset that you can then sell. But entrepreneurs,
not everybody does. Yeah.
Okay. Cause I was going to say the entrepreneurs that I know, that's not really what they're thinking at all. They are not thinking about leaving their business or anything like that. What are the biggest stressors? I don't think worrying about selling it is a huge stressor. I don't know.
It just depends, right? Yeah. Sometimes it is, like if you're trying to do the Silicon Valley, make a unicorn thing, then you have 18 months to 3 years to turn something over and sell it. But that's a very specific journey with a business. A lot of people want to build a business that they want to work in for the duration of their working life.
Right.
And then they want it to
Exactly.
go on after them. So they're building a legacy business, or they're building something that they want to have value that they can hand off to their families. So it's all across the board. There's not one way to do it and not one way that, is correct. But the clarity of what you want is helpful if you have it, right? I think the stressors, the broad sweeping things that entrepreneurs worry about are, of course, a lot of factors that they can't control. What's happening in the markets, what's going to happen with the tariffs, right? These bigger factors that happen around us that have major implications for the health and well-being of our business, but are really outside of our ability to act. I think a lot of entrepreneurs also feel a lot of stress as they are shifting from one role to another. Example, in the early phases of a business, if you're a software developer who's turned into an entrepreneur, you're really good at you're writing code, right? You're making things with this ability that you have. But if your business is successful and it's growing, eventually you're going to shift away from writing code all day. And you are going to be doing something completely different. And that gap is where a lot of entrepreneurs feel a lot of stress. The thing that they're really good at, that they have some mastery of, is not the thing they're doing every day. And now they're dealing with people and managing and directing people, hiring, leading a team, like all of the things related to the humans that help grow a business end up being things that can be very stressful. Obviously, there are differences in entrepreneurs and how they approach that work. Some people love that part. But generally speaking, I think that's a developmental gap in the life of an entrepreneur where they're like, this is a whole new skill set for me to learn. And every time there's a leap like that, every time a company gets bigger or more successful, more is asked of the entrepreneur, and they find themselves over and over in a place where they're not yet competent, where they're asked to do skills that they just don't quite have yet. And that constant sort of evolving of the job can be a source of stress.
Certainly. And that's probably universal, with all entrepreneurs as they go through the growth stage. And then once they are in a position where they're comfortable with that, then it's a matter of, scaling. Does that make them nervous as well? And stress that they're taking it to the next level, I guess.
Every time the stakes get higher, the fear gets higher. And the reality also is that a lot of businesses do fail. Even businesses that experience tremendous growth for a period of time, it's possible to make decisions such that they don't turn out well, or it's possible that market conditions change such that businesses fail. So I think that's always kind of in the back of minds of entrepreneurs, like how much payroll do I have in the bank? Like how close am I to running out of money? The reality that the thing that you are trying to keep alive is in fact a risk, is in fact vulnerable, keeps people up at night. It's a bit of the like existential angst, like, can I keep doing it? Will it stay healthy? Yeah.
Interesting. So where do entrepreneurs go for support and find friends?
I really love when entrepreneurs really have a combination of friends. I think entrepreneurs really need other entrepreneur friends, which is why EO, YPO, a variety of entrepreneur organizations that help kind of categorize entrepreneurs so that they can be in community with their peers. Those are really, really valuable network and just being with other people that get it. But I will also say, I think it's really important to have friends who just normals, like people who you're meeting with like quiz night at the pub on the corner, that you're seeing at the gym, like people who don't have the same challenges and don't care really about your P&L sheet, but are just interested in you and the wholeness of who you are. And I think the value of those relationships is also really high. And often they can kind of fall to the curb a little bit in the intensity of a business, especially in the early phases of growth.
So how do you do that? First of all, I agree with you about I've been in EO for 7 years and prior to that, Vistage. And I think they're different for different reasons, but I don't think I could have done it without it. I don't think I'd be here without that support and that connection. And it really taught me to work on my business instead of in my business and all that. But in some ways, That's not hard. A lot of entrepreneurs are scared to go do that because of the time commitment and this and that. But I don't have any friends outside of EO because like time is precious. So how do entrepreneurs do that? How do you go get normal friends?
Normals. Yeah. I mean, often it's in shared activities. So if you're raising children, it's the parents of your kids' friends or the other parents who, have kids in the same orchestra on the same t-ball team. It's people that you meet at the gym. It's people that maybe you are on a community organization or you volunteer with. I think that, I will make the case over and over again. It's a little bit of an unpopular argument, but that entrepreneurs do need to be well-rounded. Like very much need to have activities that matter to them that are outside of their business. There are a few reasons for this. One is a neurological reason, and that is that when we are doing the same activities over and over, as we often do in our business, we're thinking that around the same sort of problems. We're sitting in a chair looking at the same kind of spreadsheets or looking at code or whatever it is that we're doing. We're using the same brain circuitry. And that is really what causes us to be at high risk for burnout. We're not diversifying the activities that we're doing in a day and not diversifying the ways that we're using our brains. So if you're sitting in your business and you're running meetings and leading your team, but then you end your day and you go, coach your daughter's softball team or volunteer with your wife's music group, like whatever it is, but you are active in other parts of your community, using different parts of your brain, diversifying your network of relationships. Those things really, really bolster the sustainability of your, not just your business, but like yourself, your humanness. So you're not you're not playing sort of a one note song.
It makes sense. And I think it's very hard to teach people how important that is. It's very hard for me when I started my EO journey as learning chair. And I was like, we got to have business events. We got to teach people how to be better business people, how to do better marketing or this or that or the other. And I looked at some of these softer things and I said, why would I waste my time going to a social? Or why would I waste my time going sailing? Or this or that or the other? And it took me a long time to realize actually how really important that was, Paul.
We know a lot about how the brain works, especially coming back to understanding entrepreneurs as creators. And often it's our best ideas or the most innovative solution to a problem happens when you're on the sailboat. Happens when you're in the shower, happens when you're having a conversation with someone about a trail system in the mountains in the Colorado Rockies. Like we need this sort of cross-pollination of exposure and ideas to fuel the creativity in our brains. And that I think is what sometimes we forget as our businesses are scaling and growing is we're so like heads down focused on like this set of problems, these people moving these game pieces around the board, that when we don't get out and do the hike and we don't go over to the sporting event and don't do those other things where we're not fueling the sort of multi-directional process of our brain and creativity in the way that maybe we did early on when it was just like us and our laptop at the coffee shop.
Painting or something, or just like arts and crafts. I remember in college, I took like 2 drawing classes and I would come home or back to my dorm or my apartment after that and sleep for like 4 or 5 hours because I was working a part of my brain that I had been so dormant. So interesting.
One of my favorite things to do in my business is I will bring entrepreneurs, either individual clients or in small groups, to a flying trapeze rig. So I have a hobby and a side life as a circus artist. So when I bring entrepreneurs to the trapeze, they're climbing up like 20, 30 feet in the air. They're strapped into a safety belt, but they're forced to, they're choosing, they're not forced, but they are invited to do something that is high risk. It's scary. It's physical. And it also requires them to trust the people around them. And again, it kind of uses all these different parts of the brain. Like you're taking this CEO and making them really vulnerable, and then they're flying through the air like a kid and they're like afraid, like it creates all of these different emotional and physiological experiences, but it's a tremendous teacher in helping the brain reset and in helping someone sort of practice these other skills that can be really helpful to them in their business day to day.
That's fascinating. That's like taking them rock climbing and
Yes.
things like that, or jumping out of an airplane, which I don't know. But I think being in a harness is better than being on a parachute.
Talking about jumping out of an airplane, how does a spouse survive being married to an entrepreneur?
It's one of my favorite questions. I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to recognize their spouse as their first investor. The first person who said yes to their harebrained idea, and the person who really is on the roller coaster right along with them. Obviously, couples have a lot of range in how they set up their relationships when there's a business involved. But the presence of a business is a little bit like the presence of a mistress, right? It's this always ever present other thing that is absorbing the attention, the affection, the brain real estate of your partner. And I think it's important to just really have clear acknowledgement of we are both in this. So some couples, obviously, there's a lot of openness and sharing about what's happening in the day-to-day of the business between them. Other couples are quite separate. You have your business, I do my thing, and they don't have a lot of overlap. Regardless of the information that's shared, one thing that we know is shared is the emotional quality of what it feels like for that entrepreneur to be running that business. Emotion is highly contagious. When someone has had a bad day because the markets are unstable, they bring that home and their family feels it. Their partner feels it. They might not know the reason for it, but they are also holding the emotional quality of the roller coaster of running the business. And so I really like to help entrepreneurs understand that, both so they can be more compassionate towards their spouses who might not always be ready at every moment to respond to the challenges that they are feeling, but because it helps, I think, entrepreneurs also take some ownership over the content that they're bringing into their family, to give it some language, to explain it, to deal with it so that they're not inadvertently asking their partner to carry it when their partner may not have signed up to be an entrepreneur. That might not be the thing that they want to do. So it's a very big discussion. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have really, really wonderful marriages, partners who are I'm your biggest cheerleader. And it's wonderful to see those relationships. But they also do take, as anybody who's in any kind of relationship knows, a significant amount of work and intention to keep those relationships healthy.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I took my wife with me to my first big EO conference outside of Philadelphia, 2 years ago. And in our life, I'm just her husband, right? And I'm just letting you know, honey, a few people know me there.
I'm kind of a big deal here.
As we go there, she's like, I'm so confused. Why do all these people know you? Why do they like you? Why do they listen to what you have to say? Yeah. But I do think it's a very difficult thing. One of the things that we, in our work in funding, we often talk about risk profiles. And sometimes we see that different partners in in a venture have different risk profiles. And sometimes that can bring a partnership down if it's time for one's willing to personally guarantee and another's not, or things like that. But also sometimes spouses have very different risk profiles. And I don't think that's talked about nearly enough. Sometimes we see a spouse at home not willing to sign a loan document that's absolutely necessary. And the flip side of that, which is also sad, that case is more often the case when it's a woman entrepreneur.
Sure.
And her husband won't support her. So oftentimes it's the female entrepreneur in a relationship that has a tougher time getting a bank loan, not because of the bank, but because of what's going on at home.
Yeah.
Have you seen that, Lynn?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. But I don't know, a lot of times, I don't know if it's more so for the women or not. I mean, it all depends on their own financial stability, whether they're willing to sign for their husband, and it also has to do with their relationship and vice versa. So, but regardless, it's definitely a situation where the spouse doesn't understand the importance of what they're signing or what it means going forward and so forth. And that's a whole different can of worms. Do you deal with spouses of entrepreneurs who are not supportive?
Yeah, I often work with couples in that situation.
Yeah.
I think it's obviously there's lots of variability, but one of the things that I think entrepreneurs forget is that they need to onboard their spouse as an investor, right? Like think of all of the information and the beautiful decks that we prepare when we're pitching to investors. Like we explain everything. We explain this is the product, this is a roadmap, this is what I think, this is what the yield looks like. Like we give a lot of time and attention to bringing people along. And I don't think that most entrepreneurs remember to do that with the people who are closest to them. There's a little bit of like an assumption that like, you're my husband, you're my wife. Of course you signed up for this. And a little bit of time and attention to really onboard them as a business partner, really, because that's, functionally what they are when they are sharing property. Just give the time, give the due respect to their intelligence and their ability to choose. Don't default to these assumptions of like, we're doing this when it's not explained.
Yeah,
so I think that's one of the things that I start with.
Show me your business
Show me your business plan. Convince me.
Tell me that I should sign up for this. I totally agree with that.
Sure, I'll tell you a funny story because I think you'll appreciate this, but we've been married 26 years ago. If we were actually working in the same business, we would kill each other. Actually, no, I know couples that have built businesses together, and I don't know how they've survived it. But
I don't either. I
wife,
think it's amazing.
My wife runs a small therapy practice, and she yells at me because I make her rent, but she rents the front room of our office. She sees maybe clients a week or something. And a couple of months ago, we were fighting about something. I don't remember what it was. And one of her clients walked in the door. I'm like, tell your therapist she needs a therapist.
I'm sure she appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm sure that.
I actually got a smirk out of both of them.
I bet.
Sherry, if people want to find you, what kind of support do you offer to entrepreneurs? Are you individual therapy? Do you do group stuff? What do you do?
I do both. I do one-on-one stuff. I do some groups. And then I just provide a lot of content. So I have a couple of books that are available. One is Exit Strategy. That's the most recent book. And that's really about your relationship with your business over the lifespan of your business. So setting your business up to be able to be sellable if that's what you desire, and how to do that both logistically and psychologically. And then I have a book that is called The Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Shit Together, which is a little bit of like mental health 101 for entrepreneurs and their families.
That sounds
so
fabulous.
Those are other resources that are helpful.
Where do they find these books? Is this on your LinkedIn, on your Instagram, on your Facebook page? Where do they get it?
Yeah, all of the places. So LinkedIn is a great place to learn about the work that I'm doing. SherryWalling.com. My business is called ZenFounder, ZEN Founder. So all of that material is there. That's also the name of my podcast. Books are available on Amazon and all major booksellers. I'm in Minneapolis. Oh. I'm a Californian living in Minnesota.
Part of California.
I grew up in Northern California in Redding, but I've lived all over California.
And then you must have loved him a lot to bring you out to the cold.
I did.
You still knew or you did?
I did in the moment, and I'm still here. Yeah, we've been married for 25 years, so we've been on the roller coaster.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your ideas and wisdom with us. Very helpful.
I've learned a lot. It's very interesting what you do.
Thanks for having me.
You, and appreciate everything you do to support our community. So.
I think the entrepreneurs will really appreciate knowing how to get in touch with you. I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, reach out anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.